Hello everyone, and welcome to a new series of podcasts with myself, Liam Carroll of SYS Wealth and Financial Planners, a qualified financial consultant. The idea of these podcasts is to provide some valuable nuggets of information for people with some outstanding professionals giving health to your wealth. Today we're delighted to be joined by Padraig Shanahan of PS Tax Consulting Services. Padraig is in business since 2013. He went to college in Limerick and was based in Limerick working for 10 years before moving back to Kerry. So Padraig, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
You're very welcome, Liam. Good morning.
Good morning, Padraig. Just the first question, Padraig. Personally, how has this pandemic affected you?
Yeah, I suppose on a personal level, Liam, no different to everybody else out there. We have a young family ourselves. We've 3 kids under 5 years of age. So I suppose at the moment, trying to keep them active is a challenge in itself. Now, I suppose thankfully, being based in the country and the fact that the weather has been good enough over the last couple of weeks, it's made things a little bit easier for us in terms of getting them out and about and trying to keep them busy that way. I suppose for ourselves and both for the kids, personally, the biggest challenge is, we'll say our family is a bit away from us, so not being able to see our parents and the kids not being able to see the grandparents. I think that's probably the big issue. You know, I mean, everything else you'll work around, but not being able to see family and friends is probably the big thing.
Perfect. And after that, then I suppose the next step is professionally. How would the pandemic have affected you?
Yeah, look, I mean, again, no different to everybody else. I suppose I've been kind of looking myself in that. I have a home office as such separate to the home here that I work from. So from that point of view, it hasn't really changed my daily routine that much. I'm very lucky to have it at the moment. I suppose for professionally, I mean, obviously I can't meet clients personally, which I've always found in my line of work. You know, I've always found the face-to-face interaction very beneficial. So that's obviously not happening at the moment. But, you know, you're still trying to keep stuff moving along over the phone and by email and getting more accustomed to the likes of Zoom, which we're using now, etc., for meetings and Skype, etc. So look, it's you adjust to these things and it's all about adapting. And as long as we can keep stuff moving along, you know, eventually things will get back to some bit of normality, hopefully.
Exactly, yeah, with the help of God. The area, briefly, Padraig, the areas that you will cover yourself in your business.
Yeah, the areas I cover, so I suppose as a qualified tax advisor, you cover across all tax heads. Now I find myself, because it's such a broad spectrum, it's very hard to specialise in all areas. So I probably confine myself to a couple of key areas. So I would do a certain amount of personal income tax returns for clients. It probably makes up maybe 20-25% of my client base. And the remainder then would be, I would specialise in the capital taxes side. So dealing with capital gains on disposals, gift and inheritance tax. So a lot of my work would be with solicitors and auctioneers. So you'd be advising on the tax implications of, we'll say, the lifetime transfer of assets, succession planning, etc. So that would take up a large bulk of my work.
Yeah, that's a very broad outline of business, Padraig. And from your own, obviously you're very qualified in your industry, but nuggets of information, I suppose, that people mightn't be aware of that they can use for themselves coming out of the COVID.
Yeah, so I suppose just concentrating on the COVID itself, I suppose I mean, with so many people losing their jobs and out of work, etc., obviously the social welfare, the COVID payments that the government are paying out to people, I mean, it's obviously great. I mean, people need a source of income to pay their bills and to continue living, etc. I suppose the one thing I would say though is, and maybe at the moment it's probably not I maybe pointed out as much, but people just to keep in the back of their mind is that come next year, for people to be aware that these social welfare payments are taxable like other forms of social welfare. So, you know, I mean, people have a lot of bills and stuff to cover at the moment, so that €350 would be used up probably pretty quickly. But depending on people's own circumstances and whether there's any other sources of income coming in, just to keep in mind maybe that next year that you know, they need to look at the tax position to do with that, and I suppose, you know that there's funds there to cover that when it comes to that time. And the one other, I suppose, area then that I see is that, let's just take married couples. I'm sure there's a lot of instances of situations with married couples where maybe one spouse has lost their job, but maybe the other is working. So I suppose from a tax point of view, then it might be no harm to see maybe whether that the married tax bands can be shared between both spouses if they're not done already, so that the person who's not utilising it at the moment, who's out of work, that the person who is working can get the benefit of that. Now, I know that when the annual return is done next year, that all that would get regulated anyway, but it might be more beneficial for people right now to get that extra money into their pockets. So, as I said, the sharing of tax bands might be something that people could look at as well.
No, that's very valuable information. I think a lot of people need to get that on board, Padraig.
Yeah.
And you've obviously been in the industry a good number of years as well. And outside of the COVID, using your own tax background, any tips for people that you could pass on?
Yeah, well, I suppose I think Antoinette in your previous podcast, Liam, had kind of touched on it. I would imagine that in the current climate, with what's going on, I think a lot of the solicitors have seen probably a spike in wills, etc. And people are obviously worried about everything that's going on, and they want to amend wills, etc. So I think that's one area at the moment, because I've always kind of harped on about it myself, that having wills prepared, is vitally important, so that people's intentions are made very clear. And I think there's probably a good bit of that going on at the moment. So maybe, but what you find is that a lot of the time that stuff like that is put on the long finger because people are very busy. But I do think at the moment, when maybe people have a bit more time in their hands, if it was something that they were planning to do, I think it's definitely something that they should look at the moment. I just even to give one example, I've seen there in my own day-to-day people that might have made wills maybe in the last 10 years. So like 10 years ago, when thresholds, etc., were a lot higher, people might have left, cash benefits to people up to the value of these thresholds. But in the latter number of years, these thresholds have dropped fairly significantly. So it would be a good thing for people to review those wills, to make amendments to reflect the fact that those thresholds have dropped. And there's ways then of manoeuvring things around that may be more tax efficient. So I think that's one key area that people could look at.
Yeah, and when you're off as well, you can do these things, and you can do them by Zoom.
Exactly, when there's a bit more time at the moment to review these things.
And as well as kind of following on from the last question, any breaks or legislation available to people at the moment that you feel, in your professional opinion, is totally underused or underutilized by people?
Yeah, like following on, Liam, there, I think from the last point about people in their wills, leaving cash benefits, etc., to family members. One area I think that's totally underutilized is what's called the small gift exemption. If people are aware of it or not, it's basically where you can give €3,000 a year to anybody. It doesn't have to be a family member, and it doesn't eat into the lifetime threshold amount that people have. So I think that's definitely something that people should keep in mind, the utilization of that. I suppose the second point is that I would deal with a lot of farming clients myself. And I'm in Kerry and not too dissimilar in Limerick, where there's a lot of people in the country who are farming. One area that I found is cropping up now and again is that we'll say where land is owned either jointly by both spouses, or maybe the wife owns the land, but the husband and wife are farming it, but the accounts are going in solely in the husband's name. Then I think that's an issue that people need to look at, because I've had a number of cases over the years whereby when then down the line it might come to a situation whereby the parents want to retire and they want to transfer over the farm to the next of kin, and there's a problem from a capital gains tax point of view because the both parents weren't on the accounts, and therefore the spouse that hasn't been on the accounts, even though they might own the land and be farming it physically day by day, hasn't been included in the assessments as trading, and that leads to a problem then from a capital gains tax relief point of view. So that's something that crops up regularly, and I think is something that people definitely should be taking a look at if it's not happening already.
Padraig, I think that's there's a lot of hugely valuable advice there for people that should be taken on board. At the end of the podcast, or the YouTube clip, whichever you want to call it, and there's going to be a slide. Padraig's contact details will be at the end of it, and you're available to be contacted by Zoom or telephone or.
I am indeed, yeah. I think we've all become more efficient now with Zoom and Skype, so yeah.
I think he's given some hugely valuable advice there. So if anybody needs to contact him, his details are at the end of it. Finishing up, Padraig, on the last question, the best bit of advice that you ever received.
Oh, that's a very interesting one, Liam. I mean, to be honest, there's probably been loads of very valuable advice over the years, but I suppose the one that I use myself, and we'll say I use it in my marketing information for the business, etc. And I have to thank, I suppose, the great Roy Keane for this, is the fail to prepare to fail motto. I mean, I think in my line of business, as I said, because planning is so important and structuring matters, then obviously failing to prepare. Many, many times over the years when people have come to me, when I suppose, for the want of a better word, the horse is bolted, and you would say to yourself that it's a pity that they didn't come a little bit earlier, where we might have been able to put structures in place that would have saved, in a lot of cases, significant amounts of money from a tax point of view. So again, I think that whole thing of preparing in advance is vitally important, not only in business, but I think in life in general as well. It's across the board, really.
No, that's very good advice. And a question you're not expecting, I'd say, Padraig, will Kerry win the All-Ireland in 2020?
Well, Kerry, at this stage, Liam, I don't think there will be any All-Ireland, but maybe if it's a virtual one, they might do this year. Yeah.
PlayStation All-Ireland, Padraig.
Exactly.
Finally, Padraig, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We're very, very appreciative of it. As I said, Padraig's contact details will be on the slides at the finish. And again, Padraig, thank you.
Thank you, Liam.
The value of your wisdom.
Work.
Okay, thanks, Padraig. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Liam.